could grab a seat, we're going to get started with our final panel of the day. For those of you joining us, welcome to Art as Critique, this day-long symposium. My name is Lee Rayford. I'm an associate professor of African American Studies, and I'm going to be introducing our next panelists, and as well as participating in a conversation afterwards on art, knowledge, action, society, curatorial practices from the global South. We are truly excited and honored to welcome today two really, I think, visionary artists and space makers. They will be speaking in this order. Koyo Kua is a Cameroonian independent curator, specializing in photography, video, and art in the public space. She has curated numerous exhibitions internationally and written on contemporary African art. She is the founding creative director for Raw Material Company, which is in its 11th year, based in Dakar, Senegal. We're seeing a picture of it here. I was really fortunate to visit a few years ago, and was just sort of stunned by what, just the vibrance of that space. Raw is a space that initiates involving curatorial practice, artist residencies, arts education, and the archiving of art theory and criticism. Koyo has worked to organize the Dakar Biennial from 2000 to 2004. She co-curated Bamako Encounters Photography Biennial, has served as a curatorial advisor for Documented 12 and 13. She is also the curator of the top program 154 Forum for the 154 Contemporary African Art Fair in London and New York, and it also takes place in Morocco. In 2013, Koyo curated Word, Lisa Sam and the Undecipherable Form at Raw Material Company. And again, I had the opportunity actually to see an Issa Sam performance and just really thinking about this avant-garde and abstract in performance in contemporary African art. Finally, most recently, Koyo curated Body Talk, Feminism, Sexuality, and the Body and the Work of 6 African women artists for the Contemporary Art Center in Brussels. The Carnegie Mellon Show, Dig Where You Stand, which is a project involving Carnegie Mellon's permanent collection. So she'll be speaking to us today in conversation with Victor Albarracin Llanos, who is a Colombian artist, writer, and curator. Victor was a co-founder and member of Bodegon, an influential artist-run space in Bogota between 2005 and 2009. As an artist, Victor's work generates fictions and conflicts to create situations of vulnerability, disenfranchisement, and estrangement, using humor and amateurish approaches to music, literature, performance, and video. And I think we'll see all of that in his presentation today. Victor also writes narratives, reviews, and articles on contemporary art and culture, literature, and institutional critique. He's the author of 3 published works, Fame from 2015, El Tratamiento de las Contradicciones from 2013, and Materials for a Makeshift Shack in 2013, or also in 2013. In 2009, he received the Colombian National Art Critic Award. From 2013 and 2015, he moved to the US as a Fulbright Fellow, and in the following year, in 2016, he was part of the curatorial team of the 44th National Artist Salon in Pereira, Colombia. Victor currently lives in Cali, where he works as the artistic director of Lugar Agudas and director of Escuela Incierta. And we were really excited to just have the two really incredible thinkers and creators in conversation today. So please join me in welcoming Koyo Kua and Victor Albarracin Llanos.
thank you very much for this lovely presentation. And I of course want to thank the Arts Research Center, particularly Natalia and Lorraine for working so hard to get me to what I call the end of the world. Because earlier today someone was referring like, oh, Dakar is very far. I said, no, San Francisco is very far. So you have to excuse me, I may be a little bit slow at times because I still have to fight 9 hours time difference. It's a great pleasure to be here, and it's even more a pleasure because the conversation or the presentation that I will have referred and sharing the panel with Victor is a wonderful coincidence because Victor is part of, I hate a few words, a network is one of them, but by default of another form, I will use it. It's kind of a part of a group of similar organizations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, which is called Arts Collaboratory, and in that group or family of organizations, there are many organizations who have very strong affinities, and Uganda Dudas and Raw and Theoretica and some others are part of it. So it's family talk. And I'm also very happy to be like at the last panel because we know that everything is in a cycle. So our day will sort of revolve back to what Tarek and Chris were talking about earlier this morning about curating. My presentation is titled Institution Building as Curatorial Practice. So I will read a little bit and sometimes I will freestyle. So this talk, the title of this talk, Institution Building as Curatorial Practice, refers to a notion that has been a preoccupation of mine for almost a decade now, both in my work as an independent curator and in the context of the development of Raw Material Company, the Center for Art, Knowledge and Society, based in Dakar, that I created many years ago, and of which I'm a founding artistic director. Raw was founded in 2008, so you see the facade. Of Raw Material, and some members of the audience have visited us. Raw was founded in 2008, first as a mobile concept, and was then established as a physical space in 2011. As Raw's curatorial practice and the scope of its work has grown, so has my own interest in the way that art institutions encapsulate and act on different forms of curating. In line with the proposition by Aminata Draman Traoré, the Malian economist, social scientist, and patrons of the arts, that Africa must recover the immaterial part of herself, that which feeds her imagination, I am more and more convinced that art institutions are not only products of the environments, but also active and invaluable agents capable of shaping their societies in return. So in this talk, I will discuss some of the similarities that exist among art institutions that have emerged in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and South America over the last 15 years or so, and that have contributed to the way I understand and shape the work of the Material Company. I also want to think about the impact these institutions have had on ways of understanding the role of the curator, before looking in depth at how Raw uses programming to produce a symbiosis between its existing as an institution and its curatorial practice. So a quick introduction to the genesis of RAW is perhaps necessary at this point for those of you who are not familiar with what we do. In 2008, Dakar, situated at the continent's most western point, could boast of a relative dynamism in terms of artistic action and intellectual production. The city is best known in art circles for the biennial that it has hosted since the early 90s. In the 20 years following its independence, which was 1960, Senegal had a centralistic model of state-led cultural production, a hangover from the French colonial period and reinforced under the president-poet Léopold Sédar Senghor. The structural, oh my God, some English words I just don't want to get out of my mouth. So, the structural adjustment programs of the 1980s, however, brought an end to the state support, and while the cultural arms of international diplomacy, talking about the diplomatic term, and a small number of collectors contributed to the art scene, this led in general to a significant shift in style and content that was tailored towards the top-down goals of international development and the misplaced and deformed notion of what traditional African art should be. So what's more, by the 2000s, there was no formal space to address theoretical ideas around contemporary artistic production, and I was becoming more and more frustrated with having to apologize to international colleagues and visitors for the dearth of such spaces. So RAW was thus born out of the necessity to create a space for sharing knowledge, a place that would provide access to contemporary artistic theory, and in return generate discourse, ideas, and practice. And as all Africans know, the act of naming is of the utmost importance. What I didn't want was a name that featured contemporary, or art for the matter, or African. So, Raw Material Company thus has several significations, referring to Africa as a historical provider for raw materials for global industries, but also to art and intellectualism as raw material for human development. The company stands for both an entrepreneurial approach to artistic production and as a collaborative sense of togetherness. I will come back to our program a little bit later. So what is important to note here is that Raw Material Company emerged at the same time as a significant number of other private, non-commercial art centers away from the epicenters of the Western art world, and Western being Euro-America, always in when I say Western later. Among these, we can cite One Grupa in Indonesia, which just was appointed artistic team for the next Documenta, Teoretica in Costa Rica, and Ashkal Alwan in Beirut, for instance. All partners of a partner organization with whom we work very closely. My curatorial engagement with this phenomenon was made particularly potent when, in 2009, I was invited by Sir David Ajayi, the eminent architect, to curate the contemporary section of an exhibition I titled Geographics at Palais des Beaux-Arts in Brussels. Geographics, a map of African art, past and present, celebrating 50 years of African independence in Brussels. Very paradoxical, but it was interesting. I'll come to that later. I was growing more and more wary of curating exhibitions, and I was not interested in doing another show lining up the usual suspects that have been widely promoted over the last 15 years or so. So in my thinking, I gravitated towards the question of how Africa, after 50 years of independence, is really determining its artistic landscape. I figured that independent art institutions have altered and shaped the art scene a great deal. And so instead of inviting artists to do a show, I invited 7 art institutions, including Appartement 22 in Rabat, initiated by curator Abdullah Karoum, who is now director at Mataf in Qatar and in Doha in Qatar. Dab 1718, initiated by artist Muatos Nasser in Cairo. CCA Lagos, initiated by late B.C. Silva, to present their modus, their strategies, and their ideas in progress. The art institutions became the artworks. So while art centers in the West have been buckling under the strain of budget cuts, more and more of them seem to be opening in the rest of the world. These spaces set themselves apart from state-affiliated institutions and the commercial art market, with many of them addressing an artistic and critical void in their local environments. Some aim to establish self-organized, non-hegemonic and experimental fields, such as Curator Invertido in Mexico City, who function on a collaborative workshop model, the same like Rambopa in Jakarta. Some are deliberately questioning institutions established by the postcolonial state, and many try to fill in where the public sector has floundered. Douala Art in Cameroon, for example, was founded in 1991 in direct response to inadequate legislation on freedom of association in the country. Sud, the Salon Urbain de Douala, its triennial festival, is a platform for experimentation and intervention in the urban space of Douala, and a proposition for new forms of citizenship. In an exciting turn that at RAW we passionately encourage, new forms of South-South cooperation and transcontinental networking, including diasporic communities, are in development. We are, for example, part of Arts Collaboratory, as I mentioned before, a horizontally organized, collectively run funding network that includes some 25 independent art centers situated in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and South America. And I think this is a slide that shows one of our workshops of self-organization. So it sort of reads a little bit on its own about the commons, about horizontality and sustainability and so on. Oops. In this sense, these art centers and the way the new synergies they produce through collaboration are going a long way towards demystifying imperial legacies of geography as we work together on both practical decisions and artistic projects. Despite inevitable variations of specific cultural settings and socio-cultural parameters, the core urgencies of these spaces bear the same motives and are unbound by geographical definitions. They embrace the diversity of practices, and are complicating Western assumptions about what authenticity means with regards to regionality. Context and relativity are tools imperative for these centers in organizing new flows of ideas and production. These art centers are spaces of proximity that know their audience intimately and are therefore well positioned to engage deeply with their environment. Curator Simon Jami, one of my mentors when I was young, by no coincidence, the artistic director of the last two editions of the Dakar Biennial, argues that the creation of these spaces is therefore a political gesture that proclaims the primacy of the people over the state apparatus. In tandem with the growth in independent art institutions away from the West, there has also been a notable shift in understanding what a curator does and their role in society. Now I come to you, Derek. Today's curator, working in an independent art center in Dakar, in Medellin, or Jakarta, does far more than what is framed by norms of contemporary art. It is thus at this point constructive to pause and on the term curating. And I really very much like the proposal that Tarek gave this morning, so I'm coming with another one. The tropes of the international contemporary art world, with its close ties to market mechanisms and the strictures of academia, do not necessarily leave space for thinking deeply about artistic practices on the African continent. We must also remain attentive to linguistic precision, as in RAW, we are working in a country where the official language is French, but where the most widely spoken language is Wolof, all the while heavily anglicized in our practice by way of our relations beyond Senegal's borders. So in the Cambridge English Dictionary, the verb curate is equated with a process of selection. In Rafal Niemojewski's essay, The Aspirational Narrative of the New Curator, he guides us through the overuse of the term, referring to curated hotels, workouts, window fronts, music portfolios, restaurants, and what have you. In French, the parameters of the term are tighter. There is no verb for that. One is a commissaire, or one does du commissariat. A commissaire is someone who is responsible for a commission. There is clearly a disparity between the two definitions, as we see how in the English language, curating has become an umbrella term for an ever larger host of different activities centered around selection. Whereas in French, the connotations are with either the police or they suggest a somewhat theological economic exchange. Teleological economic exchange. This is not befitting to what Revolt does. So let's go further into the etymology of the word. Niemojewski highlights the Latin roots of the term curate, which Tarek used this morning, curare, meaning to care for. While this meaning is inextricably tied to the historical role of the curator as caretaker and protector of a particular collection, its connotations are given new life in today's social-political and artistic climate, where the urgencies of defending sites of criticality and dreaming press upon all of us. So maybe this is more akin to what we do at Raw. Our curatorial practice is our way of caring for our society and its citizens to ensure its health and vitality. These are some of the projects that we've done over the last 10 years. This need to think about processes of curation that go further, that take into account methodologies of societal care and whose interests are neither commercial nor purely aesthetic, has pushed me and Raw to engage with new or undervalued creative practice. We are forced to think about what skills and knowledges people have to come from outside of the academy or mainstream art world, but that already do or have the potential to contribute to our artistic ecosystem, another buzzword, and beyond this, to society. We have been inspired by the work of collaborators such as Chimurenga, the Pan-African Platform for Writing, Art and Politics, who directed the second session of our academy program and who deliberately stretched boundaries. As they so beautifully put it, unless we push form and content beyond what exists, then we merely reproduce the original form, the colonized form, if you will. It requires not only a new set of questions, but its own set of tools, new practices and methodologies that allow us to engage the lines of flight, of fragility, the precariousness as well as joy, creativity, and beauty that defines contemporary African life. The question thus becomes, how might raw material company produce a symbiosis between its existence as an institution and its engaged curatorial practice? As I have shown, the two are not mutually exclusive, but rather conducive to developing and supporting new forms of artistic practice that intervene in society. So I read Raw as a self-reflective institution that operates around 7 main pillars of activity, all centered in their own way on artistic research and critical thinking. These activities constitute a practice that contributes to the local artistic environment of Raw, but that equally nurture the development of Raw's practice through close ties to its public, new theoretical propositions, and the building of a local and international network. Okay. This is a view of one of our weekly public programs. I think for people who are familiar with our work, they may see what we do like internationally or the exhibitions that we do. Something that a lot of people are not aware of is that we have an intensive program of weekly debates, sometimes 2 or 3, and screenings and conversations that we don't necessarily, communicate widely, because it's really about our local audience and it's about our context. For the first 5 years of its existence, Raw pursued an intense program of exhibition making. This slide refers to it. These exhibitions include Faites comme chez vous, or Make Yourself at Home, that presented the work of 11 international artists and artist groups whose practice addresses the notion of hospitality. Chronicle of a Revolt, a time document of a season of intense political and social activity that led to the peaceful democratic outcome of 2012, of the 2012 presidential election in Senegal. And here I have to say a little story. We just had presidential elections again, but I don't want to comment on that, it's too frustrating. But Chronicle of the Revolt, we did it in 2012, and it was in the wake of what was called the Arab Spring, a term with which I really have my contention with, because the Arab world as a geographic kind of use and term, I think, is very problematic in the sense that a big majority of what is considered the Arab countries are in Africa. So as a divisive, I see it as a divisive term to really separate Africa from its north. And the idea that the Arab Spring, the Arab Spring events started, many of them, in Tunisia, which is an African country. So, and during that time, there were more or less the same activities taking place in Senegal, in Mali, in Nigeria, and so on. But the entire very divisive media reporting was black outing all these revolutionary uprising events that were taking place. So our part of, our reality of protest was all in the same time where we fought really very actively. When I say we, it's a lot of civil society organizations, arts organizations, independent public intellectual and so on, to oust our dead president who was trying to run for a third term, whereas the constitution was limiting him to the second. We succeeded, we kicked him out. So Chronicle of a Revolt was the publication and the exhibition that we did because the entire process was accompanied by photography. And we did an exhibition about that. So Chronicle of Revolt, a time document of a season of intense political and social activity that led to the peaceful democratic outcome of the 2012 presidential election. Hollandaise is somewhere here. I don't see it, but it's somewhere. Hollandaise investigated the complex relationship between the Netherlands and Africa in the context of colonization and decolonization via the distinct fabrics known as Hollandaise or Dutch wax that are widely worn in West Africa and which are not African at all, the wax prints. Alongside exhibition making, RAW has since its inception been committed to archiving the knowledge production that emerges through our programs and contributing to the discursive field we are engaged in. We have therefore produced almost a dozen publications since, sorry, I need a quick help. I'm an IT idiot. Where is Lauren? Yeah. We have therefore produced almost a dozen publications since 2011, which allow us to reflect on a deep level on our work, to open these conversations up to a wider audience and create new sources of artistic research. Our investment in reading and writing is also manifested in raw base. Our library that is specialized in contemporary African art, or in contemporary art in general, and that is unique in Senegal. Sorry. So our library is, we have holdings of over 2,000 books and publications and films and so on. We have also recently established a book club that aims to activate the resources of our library as a means to perform the library as an active space of engagement through lively public discussion. ROY is also home to a residency program that has since 2011 welcomed over 50 practitioners from a variety of creative fields. These artists, writers, curators, researchers, filmmakers, and architects spend 4 to 6 or 8 weeks in Dakar, where they undertake research and participate in cross-cultural exchange by bringing a fresh gaze to the work of ROY and the landscape it inhabits, always an enriching process for us. And we also, we have become the international program of the country because there is no real international program. So we do public service in a private sector. Central to our program and commitment to fostering a close relationship to a diverse public is Vendredi at ROY, a constellation of weekly events that offer a platform for reflection and debate around artistic and curatorial practice, architecture, urbanism, society, and cinema. The program is built around 4 thematic components and is organized in collaboration with local practitioners and specialists in their field. Vox Artists is a privileged moment for artists to share their work with a diverse audience, and Parlons Sénégalaiserie, meaning talking Senegalese, is a series of debates and discussion on Senegalese society, and our Cine Club are film screenings followed by panel discussions. And we also run the program called Citéology, which is a reflection program on the reflection on the contemporary African city space through the prism of urban and architectural policies and politics. As part of our constant negotiation with and play with different scales of relationality, being at once deeply rooted in the local context of Dakar and involved in trans-regional and continental networks, ROY has organized 2 biennial symposia reflecting on the status of artistic. We have organized actually 3. The most recent one was in September. Reflecting on the status of artistic and curatorial practice in Africa, and the other one, the other 2, this first condition report symposium was looking at the emergence, the new contemporary art landscape in Africa that is strongly defined by independent spaces. And the second contemporary symposium was looking at artistic education in the sense of how artists are trained and how artistic education has come to be and develop over 100 years in different art schools in the entire continent. And the most recent condition report symposium we held in September was looking at art history in Africa. So Condition Report has contributed to the emergence of new discourses and awareness in relation to the dynamics at play in the contemporary art landscape. In 2012, the Symposium on Building Art Institutions in Africa was the opportunity to focus on how independent art institutions have contributed to shaping the field of contemporary art on the continent. This was followed by the Symposium on Artistic Education in 2004, a moment to reflect on the status of the education of artists on the continent and the need to foster collaboration between private and public institutions. And the third condition report on contemporary African art history, which convened with art historian Smooth Uguchokunzewi, who's he's at the Cleveland Museum now. The most recent addition to our curatorial offer is the Raw Academy. Increasingly convinced that we needed to do more for artistic education, which we found to be largely underwhelming or positively problematic in our region and further afield. The second condition report, Symposium on Artistic Education, allowed us to go a long way towards confronting the scope of both the issues and proposals that exist today. Wanting to fully develop our own education program, but restricted by the pressures of intense programming, we decided to take an institutional sabbatical in 2005. So I am in an academic setting. You guys are very familiar with sabbaticals. But usually, the sabbatical is applied to an individual. We consider that institutions need sabbatical too, as a way to regenerate themselves, as a way to pause and to rethink and to reimagine what they do. So I think we were quite innovation in the sense that we established what is called institutional sabbatical, because there is this tendency in curatorial practice to continuously feed the meal and to continuously, like a hamster, doing more or less the same thing and not necessarily pausing kind of assess and evaluate what you do, and particularly as an organization like ours who claims to be so close to its environment and that is working towards a transformative process of our environment, it became essential and obvious for us to just say, okay, now we close shop. I mean, it doesn't mean that we were not working, but we were just not having public programs. We were thinking and researching and finding ways of implementing what we've learned in the process from our establishment to 2015 and what we should become after that. So this was also an exercise in remodeling the limits of what institutions, their existence dependent on staff and programming, can or cannot do for their own health and development. It was an act of protest against the imperative towards incessant production that weighs on independent art centers, and that is unfortunately all too decisive for gaining funding that is heavily weighted towards program by program financial opportunities. For RAW, it was the opportunity to wholeheartedly focus on putting together our new important program, which is RAW Academy, now in its most pivotal and intense of our activities. RAW Academy, this is an academy situation. This is our class, was the kind of classrooms that we have. And this is a situation from the first session of the Academy. We are going to the 6th session of the Academy, and if I have time, I'll come back to why we even call ourselves Academy, because it's subversive. And this is a learning situation and conversation at the studio, yard, home of Lady Sassam, who was an eminent Senegalese artist who revolutionized performance in our context and many other things. So Raw Academy is an experimental residential program for the research and study of artistic and curatorial practice and thought. The program takes place in Dakar over 7 weeks. It is dedicated to a dynamic reflection on artistic research, curatorial practice, and critical writing. The Academy is held during 2 distinct sessions every year. They are not necessarily connected. We see every session as a building block towards, radical knowledge or radical pedagogy, if you want. And they are held October to December and April to June. And each session is directed by a lead faculty who has displayed an off-the-beaten-track practice in regards to art curating and art criticism. And the Academy is tuition-free. We are very proud of it that our program is free. It's not, you don't have to pay to attend. And it's experimental study program, and fellows are newly graduates from art schools, curatorial programs, and various fields of humanity. They basically come to us to unlearn everything that they learned in India. So we take a maximum of 10 fellows for each selected session, and we consider that newly graduates or practitioners, young practitioners that are at the early stages of their career are in an incredible sensitive and vulnerable position. Often highly formatted by their education, their transition into the wider artistic ecosystem is rarely an easy one, as financial pressures and the fierce trends of the art world risk pushing them away from radical practice. It is also far too often the case that their network is limited to peers from their own discipline, and they lack contacts that will help them to complete their own skill sets and who will nurture their individual strength and perspective. So we try to catch those future artists, those future critics, those future writers and art historians at this tender moment, and to give them a space to interact with new ideas, points of views, and to put them into action together. So this is another situation of the Academy. Professor Eko Eshun, very well, Kojo Eshun, very well-known thinker and writer of the Afrofuturism. Kojo was was faculty at the 2nd session of our Academy. So previous sessions have included thematic focus like Hunger Incorporated, where we were looking at the intersection and the interplay between artistic imaginaries and political imaginaries through film and moving image. That was directed by